Welcome to the Flow Show. I'm Joanna Turner, and I wanted to do a couple of solo episodes for you. Some of the things that have come up during the first interviews I've done, I really felt like I needed to add some more context around them to make them make a little bit more sense for you guys and make it a little bit richer. So one of the things I wanted to talk about first was gridding, planetary grid work. This might be something you're familiar with. This might be a brand new term, and everybody has a little bit of a slightly different take to it because we're all having our own individual experiences, of course. But it is something that I have been experiencing myself, and some of the first few of our guests have as well. And it becomes a sort of bigger story that will hopefully make more sense as the episodes go on, and also will for me make more sense because some of it is a little esoteric, a little bit out there, but I'm all about trusting the flow of the energy and the breadcrumbs and the signs and the synchronicities that unfold in my life, which have led me on this path to figuring out that I am doing grid work, because for the first, I don't know, 30 something years of my life, I was doing it very unconsciously, although I do think I was already on my mission, and you might be as well. So if you also might not resonate with this at all, and that is totally fine. If you had told me this 10 years ago, I'd have probably told me you were totally bonkers. But it has transpired very naturally, very organically over the last few years, and it has put a sort of more of a context around my life and my rather bizarre journey that I've been on. So if somebody is a grid worker, they might feel like they are here on the planet on a mission. They maybe can't quite articulate that or don't fully understand it, but they're often feel very called to do things or called to be somewhere or to go somewhere, or they might just be a travel junkie or somebody that loves to visit ancient sites or is really interested in hill walking, for example. It could be anything. Everyone's contribution is a little bit different because we are all different. My particular contribution has come, I believe, through travel, but also it can happen when we are stationary and not traveling. So if you feel like it's not, the travel part isn't for you, you might also be very specifically needed to be stationary in one place at a certain time. And I feel like that's part of my journey at the moment. After many, many years and lots and lots and lots of travel, I have been stationary in Scotland for almost, well, about 2.5 years. And while part of me that has been so used to traveling and so used to being on these big missions has felt a little bit stifled, I can actually see from this higher, bigger perspective that it's been so important and so needed for me to be in Scotland specifically at this time doing my work, and it's actually very important for me to be here. So no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you are in the right place, and your contribution is still happening. You might not even know you're doing it. So we are, in my discoveries, all energy. And if you're listening to this, you probably have some awareness of that, or totally know what I mean. But our energy is very important. The planet has energy, the water has energy, the plants have energy, your food has energies. Everything has a beautiful energy to it, an electrical energy, and that energy travels in lots and lots of wonderful ways. So if you struggle to sort of understand things as being electrical, or for information being able to travel in that way, I sometimes just say, look, we know that I'm recording this actually on a mobile phone right now, and you might be listening to this on your mobile phone on your earbuds in the gym. I don't know where you're going to be. But for you to be able to do that, and for me to be able to record this, the information has had to travel. So I obviously have a Wi-Fi connection and my phone is connected to it. This information is going to be uploaded onto my laptop any minute, and that information will then travel through the ethers to wherever you are. And that invisible information has traveled through time and space without us really understanding how that maybe works. So information, a bit like I also teach about the Akashic records, it's the same way that there's information all around us. All of these things that I've mentioned also have an Akashic record. We'll get into that another time. But there is information and an identity and a record, and with everything in the world and all around us. So with that, you might know that the body itself has chakras. It's the most common thing you might see. They're usually depicted by somebody sitting in the lotus position with the different colours all the way up their middle, all the way up their spine. So the chakra system in the body is very important. They're also known as energy centres. And each of those energy centres that we'll talk about as you work your way up the body, starting from the root or your base chakra, all the way up to your crown, are very important. They sort of run different information within your body. And for those, for your optimal health and well-being, those chakras need to be open. They need to be clear. They can be blocked, so they might need healed. And for our energy and our well-being, all different parts of our life to be working, we want to have those running clearly and in a beautifully healed way. The other thing that might become blocked in our bodies that we might have an awareness of is we have energy running through our bodies through meridian lines. And this is probably the most easy way for you to maybe have learned about this. If you've ever been for a massage or for some acupuncture, on the wall in practitioners' places, you often see a map of the body that has lines running all over it. And those lines, your meridian lines, carry the energy between those different centers to different parts of your body. And again, those meridian lines can become blocked and might need some healing, and they might need unblocking to get your energy flowing and you back into feeling like you are healthy, in alignment, and in flow. So one of the ways that you can do that is by going for acupuncture. I used to have this wonderful man when I lived in Australia that I absolutely loved going to. But I've been for acupuncture all over the world to different practitioners, and I always find I get a really beautiful deep rest. They really help you get back into your body, really grounded and relaxed, and into your rest and digest mode, back into your parasympathetic nervous system. Now, I love acupuncture, and by doing that, some of the ways that we get our energy blocked is through traumas, and so they can help release and unlock that, and really help us get back into alignment. So I love acupuncture. Now, there are other different ways we can clear that energy. We can use EFT, tapping, other different types of trauma release. There are lots and lots of different ways that we can get our meridians clear, the blocks gone, and everything running beautifully. Now, if we imagine, so that's the body, that's great. The body goes through a detox function. You've heard of detoxing. You know, your body wants to clear itself. The body wants to get back into optional functioning, and sort of left to its own devices, put into the optimal conditions, the body will heal itself. That's what it's there for. That's what it does. That's the magic of your body. The same goes for the earth. So the earth has chakras. I'll talk you through where all those chakras are in a second. So the same as the body has chakras, the earth has chakras, and the earth also has meridian lines, except the earth, they're called ley lines, dragon lines, and even in Australia, they might be known as song lines. So The earth has those lines, and we get to help the earth clear the trauma, clear the energy, and get stuff moving by being like acting as if we are the acupuncture needles. So the human is an electrical being. If we are well hydrated and everything is working, our energy can act, and just our being in a place can be like an acupuncture needle for the planet to get things moving and to get things healing. Sometimes when we are in a place or we've felt drawn to somewhere, we might feel like we are guided to do a certain type of healing for that place. Maybe open the Akashic records of the place, perhaps do a meditation, perhaps bring through some light language, perhaps there's a blessing. You might have felt called to bring a crystal that has been activated. That's a big part of how I've done my grid work, is with crystals. You might feel like blessing some water or bringing some blessed water from one place and putting it into a river in another place. There are all sorts of different ways that we can do the grid work once we have been called to a certain place. So let's run through where those places are, because you might have consciously or unconsciously, like I did for the first part of my life, have been drawn to these places because some of them are sacred sites anyway. Some of them are sites of pilgrimages. They might have a stone circle, a church on it. So you might have already felt drawn to visit a whole bunch of these places. And there's sort of more important ones, and there are other ones that are also obviously very important, but on a slightly different scale. So let's run through what the chakras of the earth are. And I would love to know if you have felt called to any of these places, if you've gone unconsciously, consciously, and your experience of those places. So let's run through the chakras. The first are the root chakra. So in the human body, that is at the base of the spine. And in the world, it is Mount Shasta in California. So it's a very sacred mountain. I felt like I wanted to go there, but the stars and the path for it to happen didn't quite align. But I've had a lot of friends that go and spend time up in Mount Shasta. And while we're talking about this, often these spiritual places of pilgrimage, or you might have, quite often they have a spiritual community, have built themselves up there. It might be somewhere that people often hold retreats. They're not always somewhere that you can comfortably live long term, because sometimes the energies are really intense and you might have an intense physical experience just being in those places. It might shake something up in you. So people often, they go and visit, they get their healing, they get what they need, they do their grid work or get the codes or deliver the codes, whatever they feel like they've had to do, and then they go home and integrate. So these places might be somewhere you go for a week, a few days. But yeah, so the first one was Mount Shasta. The second one is the sacral chakra. So this in the human body would be below the belly button, sort of the womb space for women. So in that, the sort of sacral chakra, and it is Lake Titicaca in Peru, and it's very close to the border with Bolivia. So this one for me, randomly in about 2000 and was it 8? I think I was in Peru for the first time unconsciously. I had no idea, but I did go on a boat trip in across Lake Titicaca to a small island the name is escaping me. We went to a few islands, and I did a homestay with a beautiful Peruvian family, very basic homestay for the night. And then we went across, that was one place, and then went across to Taquile Island and had another experience there and visited the floating islands. So before I even had a clue what I was up to, I visited Lake Titicaca, of all places, right? Random, but went there. The third chakra is in the human body, it's the solar plexus. So it is sort of just underneath the diaphragm. The color is orange usually. And on the earth, this is represented by Uluṟu, which is Ayres rock, and the Olgas in Australia. So Ayres Rock, I'm just thinking right this moment, is orange, interestingly enough, very burnt orange colour. So maybe it's got something to do with that. Obviously, it's a very sacred place for the Aborigines, and is their sacred land. And one of the things that I do think is good is they used to have used to be able to walk up it. My mum walked up it in the 60s, and now you can't walk on the Ayres Rock itself. You can walk round it. So that is one thing. So I haven't been there. I had to leave Australia in a bit of a hurry, so I didn't make it to Ayres Rock. It was on my list. I was looking at flights, but then the pandemic happened and we couldn't get there. It was very, very difficult to get there. But both of my parents have been to Uluṟu, and there is a potential that their coding, and because they have been there, has connected to me, and I already have those codes, although I would love to go there one day. So it's not always you having been there, but somebody you're connected with might have been to the place, and that might be enough. And so when I have been talking to some of the other people that do this grid work, sometimes we've been to exactly the same place, sometimes somebody has been there and I haven't, but the energy, we have connected and the energy has connected. So everything is possible. The fourth one is in the human body, the heart chakra. Obviously the heart in the center of the chest is usually seen as a green light. And in the world, that is Stonehenge in England. So Stonehenge is a stone circle. You'd probably recognize the image of it. It's very iconic. And I was very much drawn there during, I think, was it the solstice in 2018? But I was there with somebody who had just been to the Great Pyramids of Egypt and had brought the sound recordings from oming with inside the Great Pyramids, and we went to Stonehenge together. So there is a connection, and we were connected directly, connecting the energy from the Great Pyramids, which is number 5, into Stonehenge. So number 5 is the throat chakra, self-explanatory in the human body, and it is represented on the planet Earth by the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and the Mount of Olives, which is in Jerusalem. So that whole area is obviously very sacred. A lot of people make big trips to go there. And if you have not listened to the episode we have with Janine Howard, she tells an incredible story about her journey to the Great Pyramids and to Siwa and her incredible journey there, all linked back to her throat chakra, because she was bringing through some beautiful light language and singing these beautiful frequencies there. So very, very interesting. The 6th is the third eye. In the human body, it's directly between our eyebrows, or more specifically our pineal gland in our brains. And on the Earth, that has no fixed location. So it's a traveling chakra. And, depending on various things happening in the world, it will move. And currently, or at least from the information I got, was most recently in Glastonbury in England, which would be the third eye. So often that is known as a sort of space of awakening, and it's your intuition, it's your connection to source. Very, very key thing to have working and operating correctly. I was also drawn there very serendipitously, and I spent some time there again in 2018. It was a very key moment for me on this journey with my grid work. The 7th chakra in the human body is your crown chakra, so the top of your head. And again, it's connecting, it's where we connect up to the heavens above, and we want to have that open for connection, for downloads, for we work through our crown chakra when we're meditating and connecting that way. So again, on the Earth, it is Mount Kailas in, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, in the Himalayas in Tibet. So it is one of those places that is a little trickier to get to, but I was very drawn to Nepal and spent some time in the Himalayas, hiking the Annapurna trail and going through. We flew past Everest on a special flight to get a really good look at that. So I feel like I've been close, but not quite there. And I was thinking about it today and thinking about how obviously Tibet and this mountain is close to Everest, and how Everest it's the sort of highest point on the planet, right? The tallest mountain, and how that would make sense for it being the crown chakra if it's at the top of the earth. So it's the closest, I guess, up to heaven, so up in those mountains. So I have not been to Tibet. I would love to go one day, but we shall see how the flow works. Who knows? So these chakras are linked. Actually, before I go on to that, so we've got the chakras, and then we have smaller energy portals, or gates, they might be known as, or vortexes. And some of these places are also very spiritual centers that people feel drawn to, like Bali, like Table Mountain in Cape Town, Hawaii, Mount Fuji, Sedona, Arizona. So there are lots and lots of these other smaller places that are very key and important in terms of the planet and the grid work. And all of these places are then connected by the ley lines, dragon lines, song lines, whatever you want to call them. So the ley lines are like the meridians, and then we act as the acupuncture needles, these pinpoints connecting connecting the centers, healing the centers, clearing the energy, and allowing the earth to operate in its highest possible state. And obviously, with what is going on in the world, it could not be more important to be doing this at this time. There is so much upheaval, so much stress and angst and war and suffering happening in the world, that it is so, so important for those of us who do feel called to do these things to go and do them. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do, to focus on, to allow yourself to do. Often these little nudges seem crazy. They seem like difficult. They seem to not make any sense. For instance, when I was sort of felt like I was in the height of my journey, letting go of my home, letting go of all my belongings, and sort of setting out on the road. I was on the road for 4 years with no home base, no more than 1 or 2 suitcases with me or belonging to me at a time anywhere. I emptied storage units. I had almost no possessions, but I traveled the world following the nudges, going to the next place, connecting with the next person, going to the next sacred place that I had no idea what I was doing. And yeah, it sometimes can feel like it comes at a level of personal cost to follow this mission, this calling. This doesn't make any sense to anybody who's not had that intuitive nudge, who doesn't understand this work. It can seem totally bananas and not make any sense, but there's something within you that knows that you have to do it. Like, you must go to these places. Like, there's something that you just that bubbles up and just is like just a very clear knowing. Now, we all get our messages in different ways. There are different, this is not what I was going to talk about. We have different ways of sensing things intuitively. Some of us are clear cognizant, clear audio. There's these different clairs, so you can either see things, hear things, know things, feel things. And so those messages are, I can't tell you that you're going to see something, hear something, how you're going to feel it. You'll know when you're getting the message. And when you start to trust the messages that come through and you start to follow them, then that's really part of the beauty of flow, is because you go, oh, that's why I'm here. And then you go to the next place and you're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. And then you meet the next person and then they say you should go here, or whatever. It doesn't make you can't look forward and make it make sense, right? It doesn't, you're like, why would I go there? I don't know. But looking back, and that's part of what this podcast, it didn't really start out to be, but part of what this podcast seems to have being turning into is the looking back and the joining the dots, going backwards, to try and understand and give some context around some of the grid work and the journeys and the experiences that me and plenty other people have had, and then to allow you to understand maybe the journey that you're going on, and to have more trust in the journey and the where it's taking you and where it's sending you, and taking that next step into the unknown, which might to anybody else seem completely bananas, and not make any sense. And it might not even make sense to you, but you just know you have to do it. So part of this is to inspire, to remind you of your mission. I certainly know some of my clients who have had these nudges, that felt called to do something, and they've just ignored them. They've just thought, no, I can't. It's not my time. It's impossible. I don't have the money. Why would I go there? I don't know anybody. Whatever that voice in your head is that isn't allowing you to really trust that guide, trust that calling within you. And part of the journey, part of getting into flow is really trusting yourself, trusting in a higher power of some sort, and really allowing yourself to surrender into the mystery, into the flow of life. And that can obviously seem very scary to some people, because it is so out of left field to do something like that. It's not the norm. Especially if you're on a career path like I was as an accountant, to sort of give it all up and step away and then go on this wild journey. So if you are in the process, if you have done it, if you are feeling the nudge to go somewhere, I would love to know what that is. I would love to hear from you. It might help me connect some more dots. You just never know. I feel like I have so many of these stories. I don't even, they're just so wild. Like, you're like, what are you even talking about? But you'll know if this resonates. You'll just know, you're like, oh my goodness, I am supposed to go there. I am supposed to do that. That's why I went there. So I'll just give you a few examples of some of the ways that I knew myself that I was supposed to do the next thing, or some of the ways that it can happen. So it's always going to be different, might be different for you. But sometimes it's been an actual invitation. So I spent some time in Estonia one summer. I think it was 2018 again, a very potent time for me. But I'd also been traveling for a couple of years at that point, and I was tired of being on the road, and I think there was a sort of nudge of like, right, she's getting a bit over this being on the road malarkey. Let's make sure she does this work before she stops and settles down and gets that house. So we so we were in Estonia for a month, there with some friends attending Mind Valley University that time. And I had some weird and wonderful things happen in Estonia, but one of the people I met, she just we went for lunch, and she just looked at me and said, you need to meet my friend Katie. And I said, oh, okay. I said, where does Katie live? She said, Glastonbury. And so Katie has linked up as being part of my story. I met her when I was in Glastonbury. She'd met somebody that I knew 2 weeks previously, and there was just a lot of synchronicities and connections when I met Katie. And I didn't, trek all the way there just to meet her, but I had already had a feeling that I should go there. I was curious, I was interested, but then when somebody specifically says, you should go and meet my friend, and that's where she is, I thought, right, that was just another sign for me that I should definitely go to Glastonbury. So, and then I had the weirdest, most wonderful time in Glastonbury, which is a whole nother story. But so that was one. And then sometimes your intuition. So when I was about to leave Australia, well, I didn't. So I wasn't sure if I was going to leave Australia. So I had lived in and out of Australia for about 10 years. I went over there in 2011. I went in 2010 and then back in 2011, and then was there in Sydney for 4 or 5 years, and then I was on the road for 4 years, in and out all over the place, and then I went back for another couple of years at the end of that 10 years. So predominantly Australia was my home. I became a citizen, and when everything happened with the pandemic and everything, I'd actually sort of I didn't know how travel was being affected, and I'd actually been was like, do you know, maybe I'll never even leave Australia again. Like I was really like settled. I'd found a beautiful area of Australia. I lived in northern New South Wales, quite near the border, a place called Kingscliff. And it was, I mean, heaven on earth. I lived on the border with Casarina, and it was just beautiful. The beaches were stunning. I lived in this gorgeous brand new 3-bedroom house with a pool, a couple of streets away from the beach. Everything was gorgeous. The yoga studio was brand new. The gym was brand new. Everything was just new and lovely and very perfect. It was kind of like, what do they call it? Those wives, the Stepford wives. It was probably like the Stepford wives version of like somewhere you could live. It was very white picket fence, but everything was just beautiful. And I was like, how would I ever find anywhere better to live than this place? It's just so gorgeous. Anyway, so part of me was quite happy to live there forever and never leave. And but then there was this little nudge started to happening. This little voice inside of my head was starting to think about leaving. I was like, this is bananas, this is crazy. I have my dream home. I've just spent 2 years making it perfect. There is no way I would ever leave. And but this little quiet thing started speaking to me. And at the same time, this was in 2000, this was the end of 2020 maybe. And my dad wasn't very well. We weren't sure what was going on with him exactly, but he was going through a lot of tests, and they thought there was something wrong with his heart, and so that was also playing out in the back of my mind. And then I was speaking to a friend about it, and I said, well, maybe, in a bit of time, maybe I'll go next year, or in 9 months or whatever. And she said, why wouldn't you go now? And I was like, I couldn't possibly, that's crazy. But again, the wheels were turning. Could I? Would I? What would it look like? And at that point, actually, we weren't allowed to leave Australia. Nobody was allowed out. And again, I wasn't really too bothered about leaving. I certainly didn't want to come back to Scotland. I'd left when I was 23 and really had no inclination to come back and live here at all. I was living in paradise. Why would I come back to the cold and the rain and the wet and all the things? So anyway, but the idea was sparked. Then I was standing one day, it was around Easter time, in my living room, and I heard a voice, loud and clear, a man's voice, shouted at me. I was alone at home, no music, no radio, nothing was on, and this voice out of nowhere said, "Get out now." It shouted at me. I was like, whoa, what was that? What was that? That was, I don't know, a spirit guide, an ancestor, my higher self, someone shouted at me. And I went, oh, okay, gotcha. And it was so clear. I put the wheels in motion from that day forward. Because when it comes through, and it comes through that clearly and that loudly, I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. And I left within a month. So got rid of all of my belongings again. My beautifully finished, decorated 3-bedroom house. I was just giving stuff away. People would come to buy my sofa, and I'm like, would you like some wine glasses and some pillows and maybe some plants as well? And people would just leave with like handfuls of extra things. I was just trying to get rid of and trying to get out. And we had it had to take a minimum of 3 weeks, sort of 4 weeks, because Bella had to get organized as well, and that was the sort of soonest schedule I could get her out on as well. So Bella is my dog, if you're new here, my gorgeous little rescue pup who's snoring beside me. So yeah, so we had to, but there was still that little piece of like, oh, do I really want to go? Like, this doesn't really, there's still a piece that was of me that was questioning. All right, let's put it that way. Or not excited. I felt like I had to go rather than that I wanted to go. But also during that time, we found out that my dad was due to have open heart surgery, which was a really big deal. He was 85. And he knew somebody that had not survived such an operation. And so there was quite a concern about my dad at that point. And it was, pandemic, NHS, Scotland. We weren't quite sure when this operation was going to happen, but things had started to move. He was starting to have his pre-op. So everything was kind of happening. And so I went to my beautiful, gorgeous yoga studio that I was obsessed with. And I did a class with a guy that I'd never seen before, just this young guy. He was a new teacher. I'd never seen him. And he did a lovely class. And at the end, I was lying in Shavasana, and on comes this song. And it's an a cappella, so there's no words. It is just this hauntingly beautiful song. And I couldn't even start to do it justice, but I kind of like, Mom. Anyway, so this song is playing, and I was lying on the floor, and the tears were running down my face into me, because when you're lying on the floor, they were running out of my eyes into my ears. So my ears were getting full of tears. I just couldn't control myself lying there. And this music I felt so deeply in my core that this music was calling me home. I was like, oh my goodness, what was that? Like, I was moved. I could feel it in my bones. I was like, it is time to go home. And I'm getting goosebumps just saying that now. And so I went up to this poor young lad at the end, covered in tears, puffy eyes. And I said, what was that? What was that song? And he said, oh, it's called, and he looks at his phone, A Calling Home. And I was like, you sure? Damn straight it is. I was like, that's exactly what it was. I said, who by? Who was the artist? And he's Anne MacDonald. And MacDonald is about as a Scottish name as you can get. I have an Aunt Anne, and I just thought, wow, that is about as Scottish as you can get. Literally a calling home from somebody called MacDonald. Wow. And that was really the last piece of that puzzle that I needed to really know that it was time to go home. I needed to go home, and I was ready. And by that point, I was packed up, and we came back. So, there's a lot more probably to that story, but these are the type of things that once you start noticing and once you start listening to them, weird and wonderful things start to happen and start to unfold. So that was a really beautiful song. I'll see if I can. I can find it, but I'll link it below and see what you make of it. It's very emotive, beautiful song. So you never know how these nudges are going to come, and I'm sure I'm going to share so much more about them in the podcast and the different weird, wonderful stories and the adventures I've been on. But so yeah, trust what you're feeling, trust what you know. And also I was going to say there's another piece of the puzzle, and I spoke a little bit about this, Janine. I think this didn't just start a couple of years ago when I was on my spiritual journey. I became more aware of it then, but I believe that we have been doing this since childhood, since before birth. Like, we've been, whether you were taken on a family holiday to somewhere as a child. My parents used to take my sister and I to parts of Scotland and Europe on these family holidays, and we'd go to ancient sites, and I'd be like, oh gosh, so bored and just hot and bothered and wondering why they'd brought me to somewhere. But often that's when it starts. So you might have gone places as a child, you might have traveled already. In my early 20s, I wasn't aware of knowing what I was looking for, or that I was really looking for something. But I think even back then, I wouldn't have obviously called myself spiritual or anything like that. But I kind of still knew I was looking for something. I was sort of like, is this it? I think there was a part of me that wanted more, even though I didn't really know. And even then, as sort of, drunk 20-year-old, I was going looking for things, and I decided in my baby wisdom that I would try and visit all the ancient wonders of the world. I was like, well, maybe there's something there I will find. Maybe that is the answer. Maybe maybe there's something there for me. So in my 20s, between getting drunk at parties and chasing boys, I went on these pretty epic adventures. That was what I spent my money on in my 20s, was these adventures, whether it was to India and Nepal, going to the Taj Mahal and then up into the mountains of Nepal, which felt like one of my, sort of breakthrough journey. I went to Machu Picchu, not knowing, hiked the Inca Trail, zero clue what I was up to. Didn't even really know it was how spiritual it was at the time. Where else did I go? I went to China, went to the Great Wall of China, did a big tour hiking and cycling around China. That was incredible. I went to Angkor Wat. I went to Thailand. Went all around Southeast Asia. I went all around South America as well. Just really looking for something, and I didn't know what it was. Obviously, it was myself. That is the eternal cosmic joke. But yeah, I did many laps of the world, including Table Mountain. I went to Hawaii. I went to Bali. I went to Sedona. All of these other vortexes that I mentioned. I went to many of these places before I had any idea what was going on. So yeah, fun times. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there for now, and we can talk about all of this stuff. I would love to know your experience. I would love to know where you've been, what you experienced. Maybe we'll get you on the podcast. But yeah, reach out, let me know. And because this is definitely not it can feel at the beginning when you're on a journey like that, when maybe you're having a big spiritual awakening like I was, it can feel quite lonely at the beginning. I felt like a lot of my friends didn't get it. They thought it was bonkers. And so I was spending less and less time with my old friends. I was getting invited to things less, probably because they were like, oh God, she's going to bang on about this something spiritual or whatever she's up to. And I felt a little bit isolated. I felt a bit lonely. Even things can come up with family members where they feel you feel more isolated from your family. You might feel like the black sheep of your family. They don't get it. They don't understand you. I've certainly experienced that. And so, this journey can feel a little bit alone. But once you sort of realize that, and once you've sort of let go of so much of the things that are no longer you or aligned or part of your next part of your journey, you do tend to you meet people, you meet new friends, people that are doing this work, beautiful communities, and you realize that you're actually not alone, and there are lots of other people out there doing this work, which is really important. And And yeah, you get there, you figure it out. There's a few rocky moments. It's not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely worth it, because I find that no matter what, if you are ignoring those signs, right? I don't know what, if I hadn't listened to that voice yell at me, they were probably like, you already know you're supposed to leave and you're not doing it. Why are you not doing it? So if I hadn't had that voice in Australia literally shout at me, and I hadn't had that beautiful song, I don't know what was going to be next. Do you know, like, I don't know, they talk about, is it at first it's a feather, then it's a brick, and then it's like a truck, like they're like, hello, let's go. let's do this thing. When we're not listening, the signs tend to get bigger, or we end up being forced to do something. And so I definitely think it's worth listening, and following through, because the signs, like for instance, I knew I shouldn't be an accountant, but it had to get that bad in my experience that I didn't have a choice. I had to leave in the end. So, and I had an accident. Anyway, that's another story. But it's definitely worth listening to these nudges, and there is a community out there, and there are more people doing this and going through it than you have any idea. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there today. Please let me know if this resonates, if this feels true for you, if you are on your journey, if you've started. The other part of this is, you don't end up traveling all the time or having to do this all the time. I feel like I was connected to a bunch of people who were doing it between sort of 2014 to 2020. There was a sort of crew, I felt like, that I knew were doing it. And then a lot of us stopped, got houses, settled somewhere, went back home, like I've come home. And I feel like there's been a new wave of people have been inspired to travel and do this work again. So it might be, if it feels like something you'd love to do, or maybe you might be ready to be called. You might be the next wave of people that is sort of called up on your mission. I don't know, but I would love to know. So let me know. And I will put some details in the show notes, and I'll put some of these notes in there as well. So hopefully you haven't had to write them down. But yeah. All right. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.